She stood in the snow, her tiny body trembling, her eyes empty from a grief too heavy for a child to carry. Moments after burying her father, her stepmother's cold voice cut through the silence. "She's not my problem anymore." The crowd turned away, but one man couldn't. Caleb Whitaker, a widowed millionaire still haunted by his own losses, saw more than just a child left behind. He saw a reflection of his own brokenness and a chance to choose differently. What began as a single step forward in the freezing cemetery became the first step toward a family neither of them expected, but both desperately needed. This is not just a story of abandonment. It is a story of courage, justice, and the healing power of love. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe to The Retold Stories, because some stories are meant to be felt, not just heard. The cemetery was cloaked in silence, broken only by the wind that cut across the open grounds with an icy sharpness. Caleb Whitaker stood still, his tall frame wrapped in a dark overcoat, one gloved hand resting on his daughter Emma's shoulder. Before him lay the coffin, the final resting place of Daniel Carter, a man Caleb had once known well through business circles, though the years had stretched a distance between them. He tried to focus on the words of the priest, but the sound of dirt against wood dragged him back into memories he had long tried to bury. The moment was far too familiar, the sting of another farewell, echoing the day 5 years earlier when his wife was lowered into the ground. He did not cry that day, and he did not cry now. The tears had left him long ago, sealed away with promises that no longer had a place in his life. Yet standing there, with Emma beside him, he felt an emptiness settle deep into his chest. Emma tugged gently at his hand, her small voice reaching through the haze. "Daddy, are you okay?" Her eyes, so much like her mother's, held a concern beyond her years. He gave a faint nod, whispering, "Just saying goodbye." She leaned closer, her mittened fingers wrapping tightly around his. Caleb drew a slow breath, grateful for the small warmth she gave in the bitter cold. And then he noticed it. Near the iron fence that bordered the cemetery, a sharp voice cut through the stillness. A woman in a tan coat, her heels sinking into the snow, was shouting, "Go! I told you! I don't care what he said! You're not coming back with me!" Her fury rang out, startling against the solemn quiet of the mourners. In front of her stood a little girl, no more than 8 years old, clutching a worn teddy bear with one button eye missing. A duffel bag slumped at her feet, the fabric torn and frayed, and her thin coat barely shielded her from the bitter cold. The woman pushed her forward, sending her to her knees in the snow, before turning sharply toward the parking lot. "She's not my problem anymore," she spat, her words lingering like poison in the air. Caleb felt something burn inside him, a steady fire he had not known for years. Anger, yes, but also something deeper, a recognition of pain he knew all too well. The other mourners looked away, murmuring uncomfortably, but did nothing. His jaw tightened. He released Emma's hand and murmured, "Stay here." She gave a small nod, her wide eyes following him as he strode across the snow, ignoring the cold seeping into his clothes. He stopped in front of the child, kneeling so that his eyes met hers. The snow stabbed against his knees, but he did not move. "Sweetheart," he said softly, his voice gentler than he realized he was capable of. "Are you all right?" The girl lifted her gaze, her hazel eyes ringed red but dry, her lips trembling. "My dad's dead," she whispered. "She says I don't live anywhere now." Her words were flat, as though reciting a fact rather than confessing grief. Caleb swallowed hard. For a moment, the world itself seemed to pause. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," she said faintly. "My mom died in a car accident. Then my dad got sick." Her tone was hollow, a rhythm that suggested she had repeated it too many times. Before Caleb could speak again, small footsteps crunched behind him. Emma had joined them, her small figure sinking into the snow beside Emily. Without a word, Emma removed her scarf and carefully wrapped it around the other girl's neck. The gesture caught Caleb in his chest, a tightness that threatened to undo him. From behind came the cutting voice once more. Karen Gaines, if he remembered her name correctly, had stopped near the gate. Her arms were crossed, her face twisted with disdain. "She's not my kid." "I'm done," she declared. Caleb rose slowly, his eyes fixed on her, steady and cold. You left a child in the snow, he said evenly. At a funeral. Alone. She's not mine, Karen snapped. I have no obligation. You've said enough, Caleb replied, his voice low, unwavering. Something in his expression made her falter, and with a dismissive scoff, she turned away, disappearing into the parking lot. Caleb turned back to Emily, whose shoulders shook now despite her attempt at composure. He extended his hand. Let's get warm, okay? For a moment, she hesitated. Her small fingers clutched tightly to the teddy bear. Then she placed her hand in his. It was cold, far too cold for a child's hand to be. Caleb helped her to her feet, and Emma immediately took her other hand. The three of them walked together through the snow, their footsteps tracing a new path away from the grave. Later, in a small cafe tucked along Belmont Avenue, Caleb sat with Emily, nestled between him and Emma. The warmth of the room wrapped around them, fogging the windows while snow swirled lazily outside. A wool blanket rested across Emily's shoulders, and in her hands was a cup of cocoa that trembled slightly as she held it. She had not touched the soup Caleb had ordered, but Emma kept her company, sliding her own cup across the table so Emily could have another. Caleb's phone vibrated on the table, buzzing with reminders, missed calls, and a meeting he should have been at already, but he ignored it, his attention fixed only on the girl beside him. So, he asked quietly, do you have any family nearby? Emily shook her head, her gaze fixed downward. My mom died 2 years ago. My dad last week. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. And Karen? Was she caring for you? Emily's small fingers tightened around the cup, the liquid nearly spilling. Her lips pressed thin before she finally spoke. She changed the locks this morning, told me I didn't belong anymore, said after the funeral, I should move on. The matter-of-fact way she said it left Caleb shaken. No child should speak with such resignation. Emma slid her cup closer again. You can have mine, she said softly. Emily hesitated, then accepted it. For the first time, her shoulders loosened slightly, her duffel bag slipping from her grip to the floor. Caleb watched silently, something shifting inside him. He had thought his heart was closed, his grief permanent. But here was a child, cast aside, asking with every trembling breath for a chance to belong. You don't have to go back there, Caleb said finally, his voice firm. Not ever again. Emily looked up, her eyes wide and uncertain. Then where would I go? Emma spoke quickly, her voice bright. With us. We have a guest room. And you can meet Cinnamon, my guinea pig. Caleb managed a small smile, though his chest ached with the weight of what he was promising. Tonight, you're staying. With us. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest, but you're safe now. Emily did not answer, but she leaned slightly toward Emma, her body relaxing for the first time since they met. Caleb knew then that this was no longer a matter of choice. It was a responsibility he could not turn away from, and perhaps a chance for his own heart to heal as well. The city was still under a heavy blanket of winter when Caleb guided Emily and Emma into his home later that evening. His loft in River North had always felt modern and quiet, a place designed for efficiency rather than warmth. But as he watched Emily stand in the entryway, clutching her worn teddy bear and the frayed duffel at her side, the space felt strangely hollow. Emma was already chattering, pointing out where the kitchen was, where the blankets were stored, where Cinnamon the guinea pig squeaked impatiently from her cage. Emily followed silently, her eyes darting around as though she were afraid to believe this place could be hers even for one night. Caleb knelt beside her duffel, asking gently if he might help her unpack. She gave a small nod. Inside, he found a few shirts, a pair of jeans, and tucked carefully beneath them, a pink USB drive with 3 words written in uneven letters across a strip of tape. Daddy's wishes. He paused, holding it as though it might shatter in his hand. Something about the small drive stirred unease deep in his chest. What is this? He asked softly. Emily's expression tightened, and she wrapped her arms around herself. My dad told me to keep it safe. He made me promise. Her voice was fragile, but steady. Caleb's throat tightened. Have you watched it? She shook her head. I didn't have anywhere to do it. He closed his hand around the drive, nodding slowly. We will look at it tomorrow, together. That night, long after Emma had drifted to sleep, Caleb checked on Emily and found her curled beneath the blankets, her teddy tucked tightly to her chest. The USB sat on the nightstand, a quiet reminder of a man's last words and a burden now resting in Caleb's hands. Morning came gray and heavy, the streets of Chicago muffled under fresh snow. Caleb stood at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, the USB lying on the counter beside him. He could not shake Emily's words. "My dad told me to keep it safe." It did not sound like a casual instruction, but a plea. When the girls padded into the kitchen in their fuzzy socks, Caleb had already cleared his calendar. The board meeting could wait. His world had shifted, and for once, business was not the priority. Emily ate quietly, still tentative, while Emma did her best to fill the silence with chatter. After breakfast, Caleb drove to the South Side address Emily had given him, her old home. The house stood vacant, the paint peeling, the windows grimy. Inside it smelled of damp and smoke, a place stripped of comfort. Emily's bedroom was empty, only faint outlines on the carpet where furniture had been dragged away. Caleb stood there a long while, picturing the little girl surviving in this cold shell of a place. His anger simmered low and steady. Back in his car, he inserted the USB into his laptop. Inside were 2 folders and a single video file. The first folder contained property records, bank statements, and one document that made Caleb's pulse quicken, an updated will, notarized only weeks before Daniel Carter's death. It named Emily as the sole heir to his estate, including a savings account, a life insurance policy, and the house. The second folder contained financial records, checks, and transfers, many signed by Karen Gaines, some while Daniel was hospitalized. Several signatures looked forged. Caleb clicked on the video. The screen flickered to life, showing Daniel frail in a hospital gown, his voice steady despite the weakness in his frame. "If you are watching this," he said, "it means I am gone. I changed my will. Karen cannot be trusted. I have seen how she treats Emily when I am not there. Please, protect her. She deserves better than Karen Gaines." The screen went dark. Caleb sat in silence, the weight of the responsibility pressing hard against him. This was not just about kindness. This was about justice. Without hesitation, he called Grace Monroe, a family attorney he had trusted since law school. When she arrived at his office later that day, he handed her the documents. She leafed through them with sharp eyes, her brow furrowed. "This is strong," she said. "Karen has been committing fraud, and Daniel's will is clear. If we act quickly, we can secure emergency guardianship." Caleb nodded. "Do whatever it takes. Emily is not going back there." Grace made calls immediately, reaching out to a neighbor listed as Daniel's emergency contact. Mrs. Layton, a retired teacher, confirmed everything. Emily had been neglected, left alone for days, while Karen sold off furniture and treated her as nothing more than a burden. The word made Caleb's jaw clench. Emily was not a burden. She was a child. That night, Caleb tucked Emma into bed, but she asked the question that lingered heavy in his heart. "Is Emily going to stay with us forever?" He brushed her hair back gently. "Would you want that?" Emma nodded without hesitation. "She doesn't smile much, but I think she could here." Later, Caleb walked past the guest room. Emily was asleep, a crayon drawing peeking out from beneath her pillow. It showed 3 stick figures, one tall, 2 small, with a single word scrawled above in pink letters, "Dad." Something inside him cracked. He had not planned for this, but maybe life was not about plans anymore. The days that followed blurred into a fragile new rhythm. Caleb hired a design team to transform the guest room into a space that felt like it belonged to Emily. No gray, no glass, just warmth and color. When she saw the coral walls and the bookshelf filled with books, her eyes widened, though she tried to hide the small smile tugging at her lips. Emma dragged her into the kitchen to help make spaghetti, laughing even when sauce splattered across the ceiling. For the first time, Emily's shoulders loosened. At night, however, the past returned. In the form of nightmares. Caleb would rush to her room to find her trembling, begging not to be sent away. He gathered her into his arms, whispering again and again that she was safe, that no one would take her. It was then he realized the damage ran deeper than any court could see. This was not just a legal battle. This was the rebuilding of a child's faith and love. One evening, his phone buzzed with a call from Detective Sean Howard, an old friend from college. "Robert Gaines," Sean said, his tone grave. "He has been trying to move assets under Emily's name using forged documents. If we do not stop him, he could drain accounts before the hearing." Caleb's hand tightened around the phone. "Send me everything," he said. "This is not just about money. This is about her life." Sean hesitated. "You are really in this." Caleb looked across the room, where Emily sat sketching sunflowers with Emma. "I am already in it. She is family now." The courthouse loomed ahead under a sky the color of slate, its tall stone facade casting long shadows across the street. Caleb Whitaker sat in his car for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The air inside felt heavy, filled with unspoken fear and unrelenting determination. In the rear seat, Emma and Emily sat pressed close together, their small hands clasped tightly as though neither was willing to let go. Caleb turned, meeting Emily's anxious eyes. "You are safe," he said firmly. She nodded faintly, though her shoulders were trembling beneath her coat. He stepped out into the biting wind, ready to face the battle that lay ahead. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. Cold fluorescent lights glared down on polished wood benches, their harsh glow matching the sharpness of whispered voices. Karen Gaines sat at the plaintiff's table, poised with false confidence, her pearls glinting under the light. Beside her, Robert Gaines leaned back with smug ease, his cufflinks catching the eye as though money alone could protect him. Across the room, Caleb sat beside Grace Monroe, his attorney, her notes neatly stacked, but her gaze sharp and unwavering. She gave him a small nod, grounding him in the moment. The proceedings began quickly, Robert's lawyer standing tall to challenge Daniel Carter's will. "There are inconsistencies," he argued, "and this man, Mr. Whitaker, has no blood relation to the child." Caleb felt heat rise in his chest, but before he could speak, Grace rose with steady authority. "We are submitting an authenticated video testament, verified by digital forensics, along with financial documents showing fraud, forged withdrawals, and coercion." She handed the evidence to the judge, her voice leaving no room for dismissal. The judge's gaze lingered on the stack before nodding curtly. "We will hear testimony." Emily was called to the stand. The room hushed as she made her way forward, her small frame swallowed by the weight of the moment. She sat with her feet dangling above the floor, her pigtails uneven and her hands clenched in her lap. Grace approached gently, her tone softened for the child. "Emily, do you remember living with Karen Gaines?" Emily hesitated, her lips pressing together. Then she nodded. "Yes." Grace leaned closer. "Did she take care of you?" Emily's eyes dropped. Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried across the room. "She changed the locks after my dad's funeral. She said I was not her problem anymore." Gasps whispered through the audience. Karen stiffened, her face frozen in anger. Grace continued calmly. "Emily, do you know why you are here today?" The girl's eyes lifted to the judge. "You are deciding where I go." "And where do you want to go?" Grace asked. Emily's voice trembled, but her words were steady. "With Caleb and Emma, because he came back for me. He did not throw me away." The silence that followed was profound. Grace then turned to the final piece of evidence. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the video from the pink USB played on the screen. Daniel Carter appeared frail but resolute. "If you are watching this," he said, "it means I did not make it. I changed my will. Karen cannot be trusted. Please, protect Emily. She deserves better." The screen went black, but the weight of his plea hung heavy in the air. The judge's expression softened, though her eyes remained sharp. Karen leapt to her feet, her voice rising. "This is manipulated. None of this can be proven." The judge raised a hand, silencing her. "Sit down, Mrs. Gaines." Then came the moment Caleb had both dreaded and anticipated. Grace touched his arm lightly. "It is time." He stood, his steps steady as he walked to the front. His voice, when it came, was low, but carried strength. "I did not plan this. I did not expect to be anyone's father again. My wife died, and I believed my life was meant to be empty. But then I saw this child pushed into the snow, left behind as though she was nothing. I could not turn away. She is not my blood, but she is my daughter in every way that matters. Every day I choose her. I will keep choosing her." His voice cracked slightly, but he did not falter. The judge regarded him for a long moment before lifting the gavel. "I rule in favor of Caleb Whitaker. Full permanent guardianship of Emily Carter is granted." The sound of the gavel striking wood echoed like a release of breath the room had been holding. Karen shouted in outrage, lunging forward, but officers restrained her quickly. "This is not fair. I will appeal." At the same time, another officer approached Robert Gaines. "You are under arrest for attempted fraud, falsification of legal documents, and financial exploitation of a minor." The click of handcuffs sealed the fate of both conspirators. The courtroom doors closed behind them, leaving a silence that felt like justice. Emily ran to Caleb, throwing her arms around him. "Do I still have to go away?" she whispered. Caleb knelt, meeting her eyes. "Not a chance," he said softly. "You are already home." For the first time, she let herself believe it. Emma wrapped her arms around both of them, and in that embrace, a family was formed not by blood, but by choice and love. The weeks that followed brought change that was quiet, but profound. Caleb had once measured his success in towers of steel and glass, but now it was in the sound of laughter echoing through hallways, in the sight of Emily sketching sunflowers on the kitchen table, in Emma tugging her sister into spontaneous games that left the living room in chaos. He watched them, and he realized his life had been rebuilt, not with contracts, but with connection. Emily still carried scars. Some nights, the nightmares returned, and Caleb would sit with her until dawn, holding her hand. But each morning, she grew lighter, her smile more certain. One evening, she slipped a drawing onto his desk. It showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sundae. Beneath them, written carefully in her own hand, were the words, "Our home." Months later, as spring broke over Chicago, Caleb took them to a house he had quietly purchased. It was not grand or sleek, but warm, with creaky floors and wide windows that filled the rooms with light. Emily stood in the doorway, her teddy tucked beneath her chin, whispering, "Is it really ours?" Caleb knelt beside her. "Every inch," he promised. Emma bounded past them, already claiming the upstairs room. Emily walked slowly, placing a small photo of her birth parents on the shelf. Then beside it, she placed a new picture. The 3 of them together in the park, laughing. She positioned the new photo slightly higher. Caleb felt a lump rise in his throat. She was not erasing the past, she was choosing the future. That night, Caleb checked on the girls one last time. Emma was tangled in stuffed animals, Cinnamon's cage beside her bed. Emily slept soundly, the locket he had given her resting against her chest. He leaned against the doorway, watching the steady rhythm of their breaths. For years, he had believed his story had ended with loss. Now he understood it had only been waiting for this, waiting for them. There are moments in life that come quietly, disguised as ordinary choices, and yet they change everything. For Caleb Whitaker, it began with the simple act of kneeling in the snow beside a forgotten child. What followed was not just the rescue of a little girl named Emily, but the rediscovery of his own heart. He had spent years locked behind walls of grief, convinced that his story had ended the day he buried his wife. But life, in its quiet persistence, had written another chapter for him, one filled with laughter, responsibility, and the warmth of a family he never thought he would have again. Emily's journey was one of resilience. Cast aside, told she was a burden, she had every reason to believe she was unworthy of love. Yet in the arms of someone who refused to walk away, she found belonging. Every scar, every tear, was met not with pity but with patience. With Emma's open heart and Caleb's steady hand, she learned that family is not defined by blood, but by choice, by those who stay when it would be easier to leave. Her smile, once so rare, became the proof that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. This story reminds us that the world is full of children like Emily, and of men and women like Caleb who have the power to change a life with a single act of courage. It is a testament to love that does not give up, to justice that refuses to stay silent, and to the second chances that wait quietly for us to take them. The coldest winters can lead to the warmest homes. The heaviest grief can lead to the deepest joy, and the loneliest hearts can find family in the most unexpected places. If this story has touched you, if it has reminded you of the power of compassion and the beauty of second chances, we invite you to stay with us. Here at the Retold Stories, we believe in sharing tales that heal, inspire, and remind us that kindness still exists in this world. Every story is a light, and together they can brighten the darkest night. Subscribe to the Retold Stories, turn on notifications, and join us for the next journey. Because the story you need most may be waiting just around the corner, ready to be retold.